Okay, Emma, I need you to settle something for me. How many people do you think have told themselves, I'll learn English when things calm down?
Oh, basically everyone? And here's the brutal truth. Things never calm down. Life doesn't suddenly hand you 3 free hours a day. That's the trap.
So today, we're dismantling this whole too busy to learn English excuse. Because the real problem isn't your schedule, it's that you're using a learning system designed for people who have nothing else going on.
What's compelling is that the science actually shows us how to work with a chaotic life, not against it. We're going to talk about why those tiny moments you're already wasting could be your secret weapon.
We've got some high-leverage techniques that take almost zero extra time but deliver disproportionate results. I've personally tested all of these, and some of them felt ridiculous at first, but the data doesn't lie.
And we're also diving into the psychological traps that kill consistency, because even the best system fails if perfectionism convinces you that imperfect practice doesn't count. So if you've ever thought, I just don't have time for this, stick around. We're about to show you why that's not actually the problem you need to solve.
All right, let's tackle the elephant in the room. I've tested dozens of language learning systems, and I keep seeing the same pattern. Busy professionals download Duolingo, buy a grammar book, maybe sign up for a course, and 3 weeks later, they've quit. Emma, what's actually happening here?
Here's what the data shows. Busy people fail at English not because they're actually busy, but because they're trying to learn the wrong way. They're using methods that require books, long grammar sessions, perfect silence. It's like trying to run a marathon training program designed for college athletes when you're a working parent.
I call this the school student trap. We're conditioned to think learning means sitting at a desk for an hour with a textbook. But when was the last time you had an uninterrupted hour of perfect focus? For most people, that's never.
Never. And here's the kicker. The #1 reason people cite for discontinuing English practice is lack of time. But when you dig deeper, the real problem isn't time. It's the lack of a realistic system. They're waiting for their schedule to magically clear up.
Which brings us to what I call the free schedule myth. I've been tracking my own calendar for years, and I can tell you with certainty, life never actually slows down. You finish one project, another appears. Your kid graduates from needing constant attention, then your aging parents need help. There's always something.
I tested this myself last year. I kept telling myself I'd start learning Spanish when things calmed down. Guess what? They never did. I had to completely reframe what learning even means.
So what does work? Because I'm obsessed with finding the minimum effective dose. What's the 20% of effort that gets 80% of results?
This is where cognitive load theory becomes really practical. The research shows that traditional, lengthy instruction leads to cognitive overload. Your brain literally can't process it all. But when you segment learning into bite-sized units, information becomes much easier to process and retain.
Let's get specific about what's breaking down. I think there's another hidden factor here: decision fatigue. Every day you wake up and have to decide, do I study today? When? For how long? What material? By the time you've made all those decisions, you're exhausted and you haven't even started.
That's the system failure. Without a realistic, pre-decided framework, you're burning willpower on logistics instead of actual learning. It's like trying to eat healthy without meal prep. Every meal becomes a negotiation with yourself. And here's what I found through my own experiments.
The solution isn't finding more time. It's completely redefining what learning looks like. We need to move from memorization to daily contact and output.
What does that shift actually mean in practice?
Instead of, I need to study grammar for an hour, it becomes, I need to use English for 10 minutes today. The focus shifts from input and memorization to actual production. You're not trying to learn everything. You're trying to maintain contact with the language every single day.
This aligns perfectly with what we know about habit formation and memory consolidation. Spaced repetition beats cramming every single time. 10 minutes daily for a month will destroy one 4-hour session in terms of retention.
And the beautiful part? 10 minutes doesn't require a free schedule. It doesn't require perfect conditions. It just requires a system that tells you exactly what to do and when to do it so you're not making decisions every day.
I'm curious though, because I know our listeners are thinking this. What about quality? Doesn't shorter mean less effective?
That's the wrong metric. The question isn't how much can I learn in one session, it's how much can I retain over 6 months? And consistency beats intensity every single time. I'd rather have someone do 10 minutes daily for 180 days than 3 hours once a week. The total time is similar, but the results aren't even close.
The math is actually pretty compelling. 10 minutes a day is 70 minutes a week. That's more than an hour, but it's distributed in a way that your brain can actually process. Plus, you're not fighting the cognitive overload that comes from marathon sessions.
So if we're being honest with ourselves, and this is the optimization mindset, the real barrier isn't time poverty, it's system poverty. Most people are trying to force a student's learning system into an adult's chaotic life. That's the mismatch we need to fix.
If we accept that traditional methods don't work for busy adults, what does a properly optimized system actually look like? What are the specific mechanics that make daily contact possible? All right, let's talk about the math that actually makes this work, because when people hear just 10 minutes a day, they think it's too small to matter. But here's what I love about this. 10 minutes of daily speaking practice adds up to 300 minutes per month. That's 5 full hours of active practice. And according to the research, that's more than most language learners actually achieve in a month of trying to learn English.
Wait, hold on. Most people don't even hit 5 hours a month? That seems low.
It does, right? But think about it. How many people download Duolingo, do it for 3 days, then ghost it? Or buy a textbook that sits on their shelf? The consistency is what kills people. They're waiting for that mythical perfect hour to study, which never comes. Meanwhile, someone doing 10 minutes every single day is quietly lapping them.
So it's the compound interest of language learning. Small deposits, but the consistency is what creates the exponential curve.
Precisely. And here's where the science gets compelling. Micro-learning modules, which typically last between 1 and 10 minutes, are specifically designed to meet learning outcomes that can be immediately applied. It's not just about the time, it's about the structure. You're not trying to absorb a whole grammar chapter. You're learning one thing you can use today.
Okay, but I want to push back on something, because I've tried the little and often approach with other skills, and sometimes it feels like I'm not making progress. Like, am I actually retaining anything, or am I just going through the motions?
That's where spaced repetition comes in, and this is backed by decades of cognitive science. When you practice in short intervals over time, you significantly improve long-term retention compared to massed practice, the cramming approach. Your brain needs time to consolidate. Think of it like working out. You don't build muscle during the workout, you build it during recovery. Same with language. Those gaps between your 10-minute sessions, that's when your brain is actually wiring the new patterns. So the rest days are part of the system, not a bug. Not rest days, rest hours. You're still doing it daily, but you're giving your brain 23 hours and 50 minutes to process before the next session. And here's the key shift that most people miss. Learning English really means only 2 things: daily contact with the language and daily output, even speaking just a little bit. It's not about input overload. It's about consistent exposure plus active use.
So you're saying the traditional model is backwards? People think they need to consume more podcasts, more videos, more reading, when actually they need to produce more?
Yes, this is what I call the shift from mugging up to smart exposure. Mugging up is that old school approach. Memorize lists, cram vocabulary, hope it sticks. Smart exposure is about strategic contact with the language at the right level, combined with forcing yourself to produce output. Because here's the thing. You can listen to English podcasts for 10 hours and still freeze when someone asks you a question. But if you spend 10 minutes actually speaking, even to yourself, you're building the neural pathways for production.
Okay, so how do you find that right level? Because I imagine if it's too easy, you're wasting time. Too hard, you're just frustrated and quit.
This is what I call the Goldilocks rule for language, and it's critical for 10-minute sessions. You want material that's about 85.
All right, so we've established that 15 minutes is doable. But here's the real problem most people face. They know they should practice English. They even want to practice English. But when 7 p.m. rolls around after a brutal day at work, their brain just negotiates them out of it. I'm too tired. I'll do it tomorrow. Just one episode on Netflix first. Sound familiar?
Oh, completely. That internal negotiation is exhausting in itself. And what's compelling is that willpower is actually a finite resource. Every time you have to decide whether to do something, you're burning mental energy. So by the end of the day, you've already made hundreds of decisions, and your brain is just done.
Which is why I'm obsessed with this concept, habit stacking. The idea is simple. You don't create a new standalone habit that requires willpower. Instead, you attach your English practice to something you already do automatically, something that's already on autopilot.
You're piggybacking on existing neural pathways. Your brain already has a routine. Let's say making your morning coffee. You don't think about it, you just do it. So if you can link English practice to that coffee-making routine, it becomes part of the same automatic sequence.
The research backs this up. The formula is dead simple. After existing habit, I will new habit. So it could be after I start my commute, I will listen to an English podcast. Or after I open Instagram, I will spend 10 minutes on an English learning app instead. You're leveraging triggers that already exist in your day.
I love that you mentioned the Instagram example because that's such a sneaky one. Most of us don't even realize we're scrolling. It's completely automatic. We pick up our phone, thumb goes to the app, and suddenly 20 minutes have vanished. What if you just redirected that impulse?
The social media swap. This is one of my favorite experiments. Here's what I did. I moved my English learning app to the exact spot where Instagram used to be on my home screen. Instagram got buried in a folder. So when my thumb automatically went to that spot, boom, I'm in the English app instead. 10 minutes of mindless scrolling became 10 minutes of speaking practice. Same trigger, different action.
That's brilliant because you're not fighting the habit, you're redirecting it. The urge to pick up your phone and zone out is still there, but now it's serving a different purpose. Did you find it hard to stick with?
The first 3 days were weird. My brain was like, wait, this isn't the dopamine hit I ordered. But by day 4 or 5, it felt normal. And here's the key. I didn't try to eliminate the scrolling entirely. I still got my Instagram time, just later in the day. I wasn't depriving myself, I was just reordering things.
That's such an important point. People often fail at habit change because they try to go cold turkey on something they enjoy. But if you're just swapping the order, it feels way less restrictive. Now, you mentioned commuting earlier. That's another huge opportunity, right?
If you commute 30 minutes each way, that's an hour a day of time that's already allocated. You're stuck in a car or on a train anyway, so the trigger is automatic. After I start my car or after I sit down on the train, I will turn on an English podcast. No extra time needed, no willpower required. It's just filling dead time with something useful.
And cooking. That's another one people overlook. You're standing there waiting for water to boil or stirring something on the stove. Your hands are busy, but your ears are free. Perfect time for listening practice.
Yes. After I start cooking dinner, I will play an English podcast or audiobook. It's the same principle. You're not adding a new task to your day. You're layering English onto something you're already doing. Walking the dog, doing laundry, even brushing your teeth. These are all anchor habits.
Okay, but let's talk about the same time, same place rule, because I think this is where a lot of people mess up. They say, I'll practice English whenever I have time, which sounds flexible, but it's actually a trap, isn't it?
Total trap. Whenever I have time means never, because you're reintroducing decision fatigue. Every single day you have to decide when to do it, and your brain will find a reason to postpone. But if you fix a specific time, like right after I finish work at 5:30 p.m., I will practice English for 15 minutes, your brain stops negotiating.
It enters autopilot mode. The research actually shows this. When you fix a specific time for a task, your brain treats it like a non-negotiable appointment. It's not, should I do this anymore? It's just, this is what happens at 5:30.
And the same place part matters too. If you always practice in the same physical location, like at your kitchen table or in your car, that location itself becomes a trigger. You sit down and your brain goes, oh, this is English time. It's like how you feel sleepy when you get into bed because your brain associates that place with sleep.
So you're essentially training your environment to cue the behavior. That's why I always tell people, don't practice English in bed if you also watch Netflix in bed. Your brain won't know which mode to be in. Pick a dedicated spot even if it's just a specific chair.
Once you've stacked the habit and fixed the time and place, it stops feeling like effort. I'm not exaggerating when I say my English practice now feels as automatic as brushing my teeth. I don't think about it. I don't debate it. I just do it because it's 5:30 and I'm in my car. That's the ultimate goal, isn't it? To make it so automatic that willpower isn't even part of the equation. You're not relying on motivation or discipline. You're relying on systems and triggers that do the work for you. Motivation is unreliable. Systems are forever. So if you're listening and thinking, I don't have time for English, I want you to audit your day. What do you already do every single day without thinking? Commute, scroll, cook, walk? That's your anchor. Attach English to that, fix the time, and watch what happens.
And start small. Don't try to stack 5 new habits at once. Pick one anchor, one trigger, and build from there. Once that feels automatic, you can add another. But the key is consistency over intensity.
One solid habit stack is worth more than 10 ambitious plans that never happen. So here's your homework. Identify one existing habit in your day and decide what English practice you will attach to it. Write it down. After I blank, I will blank. Make it specific, make it non-negotiable, and then just let your brain do the rest. Because once it's on autopilot, you're not learning English anymore, you're just living your life, and English happens to be part of it, which frankly is the only way this works long-term for busy people. Now, habit stacking gets you consistent, but there's still one more piece of the puzzle. What do you actually do during those 15 minutes to maximize results? Because not all practice is created equal. Some methods give you 10x the return for the same time investment, and that's where things get really interesting. All right, so we've established the framework, 15 minutes, strategic placement. Now let's get tactical. What are the actual techniques that give you the most bang for your buck? Because I've tested dozens of language learning methods, and most of them are wildly inefficient.
This is where it gets interesting. The research shows there are 4 high-leverage practices that build fluency without requiring dedicated study time. The first one is brilliantly simple. It's called Think Aloud practice.
Wait, I think I know where you're going with this. You're literally narrating your life in English?
Yes, you just say what you're doing as you do it. I'm opening my laptop. I'm checking my email. I'm making coffee. It sounds almost too simple, but here's why it works. You're building fluency in real time without carving out extra time. You're already doing these activities anyway.
I love this because it's pure optimization. Zero additional time investment, but you're getting reps in. It's like doing calf raises while brushing your teeth. But I'm curious, doesn't this feel awkward at first? Are people actually going to do this?
Oh, it's definitely weird initially. I tested this myself for 2 weeks. The first few days, I felt ridiculous narrating my morning routine. But here's what happened. By day 5, I noticed I was thinking in English more naturally. The internal monologue started shifting. And the beauty is you can do it silently if you're in public. Just think the words instead of saying them out loud.
Smart adaptation. Now, the second technique I want to break down is shadowing, because I've seen this recommended everywhere, but most people do it wrong. What's the actual protocol here?
Shadowing is where the science gets really compelling. You play a short English clip, could be a podcast snippet, a movie scene, whatever, and you repeat it immediately, trying to match not just the words, but the emotion and intonation. The research shows this strengthens what's called the phonological loop, which is basically your brain's audio processing system for language.
Hold on, you said with emotion. That's the key variable most people miss, right? Because I've tried shadowing before and it felt mechanical. I was just parroting sounds.
Yes, the emotion is critical. When you mimic the emotional tone, you're not just processing words, you're processing meaning and context simultaneously. That's what enhances real-time speech processing. And here's the efficiency metric that matters. 5 minutes of shadowing with emotion is more powerful than an hour of passive reading.
That's a 12x efficiency gain. Okay, I'm sold, but let's get specific on implementation. What's the minimum effective dose? How do I actually structure 5 minutes of shadowing? Pick a 30-second to 1-minute clip. Something with clear emotion. A movie scene works great. Play it once to understand the context, then play it again and shadow it 3 to 5 times in a row. That's it. You can do this while getting ready in the morning, during a work break, literally anywhere with headphones. I'm already thinking about my morning routine optimization. This slots in perfectly while I'm making breakfast. Now, the third technique, one-topic speaking. Walk me through this because it sounds deceptively simple.
It is simple, but there's a crucial rule that makes it work. You choose a small daily topic, could be what I did yesterday, or my opinion on remote work, and you speak about it for 5 to 10 minutes without stopping. The key is no corrections. You don't stop to fix grammar, you don't pause to search for the perfect word, you just keep talking.
This is counterintuitive because every instinct tells you to correct mistakes as you make them, but I'm guessing that's actually counterproductive.
Completely counterproductive for fluency building. When you stop to correct yourself, you're training your brain to be hesitant. You're reinforcing the pause and perfect pattern. But fluency is about flow. Native speakers make grammatical errors all the time in casual conversation. They just keep going. This practice trains that forward momentum.
So it's like the rough draft principle in writing. Get the ideas out first, edit later. But here's my question. If you're not correcting mistakes, how do you improve? Aren't you just reinforcing bad habits?
Great question. The correction comes later, in a separate phase. During a speaking session, you're building fluency and confidence. Then, maybe once a week, you can record yourself and review it, or get feedback from a tutor. But in the moment, the goal is pure output. And most mistakes self-correct naturally as you get more exposure to the language.
That makes sense. It's like strength training versus technique work. You need both, but you don't do them simultaneously. Now, the fourth technique is where technology comes in. You mentioned AI tools. What's the actual ROI here? This is where it gets really practical for busy people. There's an app called Sparky AI that's being used by over 500,000 learners. It's voice-based, so you can have actual conversations with it, and it gives you real-time feedback on grammar and pronunciation. The cost is around 100 rupees a month. That's roughly $1.50. Wait, let me break down that value proposition. A traditional tutor might cost 500 to 1,000 rupees per hour. If you're getting unlimited practice for 100 rupees a month, that's potentially 10 to 20x cost savings. But is the quality comparable? It's not a replacement for human interaction, but it solves a specific problem, the judgment-free practice zone.
A lot of people are too self-conscious to speak English with real people. They're afraid of making mistakes. With AI, you can make all the mistakes you want, get immediate feedback, and there's zero social pressure. That's a huge psychological barrier removed. And I'm thinking about the time optimization angle. You can do this during a commute, during lunch break, literally any dead time. You're not scheduling around another person's availability. Precisely. And here's how I'd stack these techniques for maximum efficiency. Morning routine, think aloud practice while getting ready, 5 minutes of shadowing while making breakfast. Lunch break, 10 minutes of one-topic speaking, maybe recorded on your phone. Evening commute or downtime, 15 minutes with Sparky AI. That's your full 15-minute framework, distributed throughout the day.
I love how modular this is. You're not doing one 15-minute block, you're doing 3 to 5 micro sessions that fit into existing routines. But I want to push back on something. What about people who say they need structured lessons, grammar rules, vocabulary lists? Isn't this approach too informal? That's the traditional mindset, and it's what keeps people stuck. Look, grammar and vocabulary are important, but they're not the bottleneck for most busy professionals. The bottleneck is speaking confidence and fluency. You can know all the grammar rules in the world and still freeze up in a real conversation. These techniques target the actual constraint. That's a huge psychological barrier removed. And I'm thinking about the time optimization angle. You can do this during a commute, during lunch break, literally any dead time. You're not scheduling around another person's availability. Precisely. And here's how I'd stack these techniques for maximum efficiency. Morning routine, think aloud practice while getting ready, 5 minutes of shadowing while making breakfast. Lunch break, 10 minutes of one-topic speaking, maybe recorded on your phone. Evening commute or downtime, 15 minutes with Sparky AI. That's your full 15-minute framework, distributed throughout the day. I love how modular this is. You're not doing one 15-minute block, you're doing 3 to 5 micro sessions that fit into existing routines. But I want to push back on something. What about people who say they need structured lessons, grammar rules, vocabulary lists? Isn't this approach too informal?
That's the traditional mindset, and it's what keeps people stuck. Look, grammar and vocabulary are important, but they're not the bottleneck for most busy professionals. The bottleneck is speaking confidence and fluency. You can know all the grammar rules in the world and still freeze up in a real conversation. These techniques target the actual constraint.
So it's about identifying the limiting factor. For someone who's been studying English for years but can't speak fluently, more grammar study isn't the answer. They need output practice. These 4 techniques are pure output optimization.
Right. And the beauty is they're all testable. You can try each one for a week and measure your own results. Do you feel more confident speaking? Are you thinking in English more naturally? Can you express ideas more quickly? Those are the metrics that matter, not how many vocabulary words you've memorized.
All right, so we've got the techniques. But here's what I'm wondering. How do you actually make these stick? Because knowing what to do and actually doing it consistently are 2 very different things. All right, so we've talked about building the system, but here's where most people actually fail. Not because they don't know what to do, but because they quit on a bad day. I want to talk about what I call the one-sentence safety net. This is the single most important burnout prevention tool I've ever tested.
Oh, this is crucial because the research on maladaptive perfectionism is really clear here. When learners have high concerns over mistakes and what's called doubt of action, they're significantly more likely to use avoidance coping. Basically, if you think it has to be perfect or it doesn't count, you'll just not do it at all.
That's the trap. So here's the rule. On your absolute worst days, when you're exhausted, you worked late, the kids are sick, whatever, you promise yourself just one sentence. That's it. One sentence in English. Could be something like, today was exhausting, but I didn't quit. You write it down, you say it out loud, and you're done.
Wait, but doesn't that feel like cheating? Like you're not really learning anything from one sentence?
That's the perfectionism talking. Look, consistency doesn't mean doing it perfectly every day. It means never breaking the chain intentionally. Because even 2 minutes counts. The goal isn't to have a perfect practice session every single day. The goal is to not give your brain permission to quit.
This connects to something really important about how we frame English learning. English is a skill to be practiced, not a subject to be studied. So a bad English day is always better than a 0 English day. You're still building the neural pathways, even if it feels messy. I tested this myself during a brutal work week last year. I had 3 days where I literally only did 1 sentence. And you know what? I didn't break the chain. The habit survived. And the following week, when things calmed down, I was right back to my full routine. If I'd skipped those 3 days thinking, well, I can't do my full 15 minutes, so why bother, I would have lost momentum entirely. This is what I love about this approach. It's almost like you're hacking your own psychology. You're removing the decision fatigue.
On a terrible day, you're not asking yourself, should I practice English? You're asking, do I have 30 seconds to write one sentence? The answer is always yes.
And here's the thing people don't realize. Practicing while exhausted is actually still a win. I call it tired English. Your brain is in a different state. You're accessing different vocabulary. You're forcing yourself to communicate when you don't have full cognitive resources. That's incredibly valuable practice.
That's such a good point, because in real life, you're not always going to be well-rested and sharp when you need to use English. You might be jet-lagged in a meeting, or stressed during a presentation, or exhausted at the end of a conference. Practicing in those states is actually more realistic.
So let me give you the practical implementation. Set a minimum viable practice that's so small it feels almost silly. One sentence, one voice message to yourself, 1 minute of shadowing while you brush your teeth. Whatever it is, make it so easy that even on your worst day, you can't say no.
And I think it's worth emphasizing, this isn't about lowering your standards. This is about protecting the habit. On good days, you'll naturally do more, but on bad days, you have this safety net that keeps the chain alive.
The psychological shift is huge. Instead of thinking, I failed because I only did 2 minutes, you think, I won because I didn't break the chain. That reframe is everything. The all-or-nothing mindset kills more progress than lack of talent ever will.
So if someone's listening and thinking, but I want to make real progress, not just maintain a streak, what would you say to them?
I'd say the streak is the progress. Because here's what happens. You maintain the habit through the rough patches, and when life gets easier again, you're still in the game. The person who quit because they couldn't do it perfectly, they have to start over from zero. You're already warmed up and ready to accelerate. That's the real optimization.
And once you internalize this, that bad English is better than zero English, it changes everything. You stop waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect energy level, the perfect study environment. You just do it, even if it's messy.
Which brings us to something I want to address head on, because I know some people are thinking, this all sounds great, but I've tried habit building before and it didn't stick. There's actually a specific reason why most habit advice fails for language learning, and it has to do with how we measure progress.
So here's what it really comes down to. If you're waiting for your life to calm down before you start learning English, you're essentially deciding never to start. Because that magical quiet period, it doesn't exist.
And what we've been building toward this whole conversation is a fundamental reframe. You don't need to find time for English. You need to design a system that works inside the life you already have. That's the optimization.
The beautiful part is how simple the actual implementation is. Pick one existing habit, your morning coffee, your commute, whatever, and stack one English practice onto it. That's your starting point, not a 2-hour study block, just one anchor.
And protect that consistency like it's the most valuable thing you own, because it is. The research is crystal clear. Your brain doesn't care if you practiced for 5 minutes or 50. It cares that you showed up today and yesterday and the day before. That's what builds fluency.
I'd add one more thing for anyone listening who's tried and quit before, and I've been there myself with other skills. The one-sentence rule isn't just a safety net. It's actually a psychological hack that removes the biggest barrier, the fear of breaking your streak. Once you know that even your worst day still counts, the pressure evaporates.
That's such an important point. Perfectionism kills more learning journeys than difficulty ever does. So if you take nothing else from this episode, take this. Imperfect action beats perfect planning every single time. Your messy, inconsistent, good enough practice is infinitely more valuable than the flawless study plan you never start. So here's your homework, if you want to call it that. Before this week ends, pick your anchor habit and decide what your one-sentence minimum looks like. That's it. You're not committing to fluency in 90 days or any of that nonsense. You're just committing to showing up tomorrow. And if you do that consistently, 6 months from now, you'll look back and realize you didn't find time to learn English. You built a system that made it inevitable. That's the difference between hoping for results and engineering them.
Couldn't have said it better. All right, go stack some habits, and we'll see you next time with more systems worth stealing.